Hello. Hi. Welcome. I just want to welcome everyone to our event today, Anatolian Days and Nights, and welcome you. My name is Kim Naji, and on behalf of the 3,400 writers, translators, and editors of PEN, it is our great pleasure to welcome you to the 8th Annual PEN World Voices Festival of International Literature. I'd like to take a moment to thank the festival's sponsors and supporters, without whose generosity none of this would be possible, as well as the Standard New York and the High Line, which are serving as the festival's hubs this year. I'd also like to thank the more than 100 volunteers who have given their time to help us. Several volunteers are up front right now and have done so much work to help make the successful events at PEN. There are many more festival events for you to attend, even though it's over tomorrow, but I urge you to go and browse the complete schedule of events on www.pen.org. There are also programs up front that you can take a look at. This year, PEN American Center celebrates its 90th anniversary. For 9 decades, our PEN Center, the largest of 144 branches around the world, has not only been instrumental in freeing hundreds of writers imprisoned for their words, but we have also defended freedom of expression by making sure all voices get to be heard through demonstrating to the incarcerated how writing can be a powerful tool for living, as well as increase national readership. It is PEN American Center's belief that writing of all kinds, plays, essays, and novels, as well as poems and graphic art, provide a survival kit for living. And at this event, we really just want to celebrate, literature in all of its forms, particularly in the beloved books. So please do remember that books are for sale up front, and the authors will be signing their book at the end of this event. Before I introduce each of our guests, please turn off all things in your possession, which beep, ring, buzz, play musical tunes, or even squeal. Even if you think you might have turned them off, please do check again. And we do greatly appreciate it. I know one of our participants. But I would like to take some time to thank some more people who have helped to make this an incredible event. First of all, I want to introduce myself, though. I am, again, Kim Naji, and I'm executive editor of Wild River Review and co-founder of Wild River Books, the publisher of the book that we are celebrating today, Anatolian Days and Nights. Again, I want to thank PEN staff, especially Jaka Borsos, the festival director, Beth Weinstein, Luke Thomas, who is here today with us, Laylee Kleinbard, Laura Feinstein, and I also want to thank Ebru Ecer, director of the Turkish Culture and Tourist Office in New York, and her staff, especially Agi. I also want to thank the host of the Double Knot Gallery and the owner of the gallery, Murat Kupçu. And we have food and drinks here. And we can thank the restaurant Turks and Frogs for that. We also have wonderful musicians here to celebrate. And they include Faruk, Josh Kunlen, Amut, Ertuğrul, and Peter Darrington. So, and also, finally, last but not least, we have chocolate. And I want to thank Red Talhammer with Antidote Chocolate for bringing chocolate today for you to enjoy after the performance. So, those are all my thank yous, and I'm going to introduce our speakers and the authors of Anatolian Days and Nights now. Released March 1st, Anatolian Days and Nights has already been praised widely. Best-selling Turkish author Elif Shafak describes the book as compassionate, nuanced, tender, and informative. This book will change your perspective on contemporary Turkey. Harriet Fulbright applauds the authors, quote, saying that through their skill for storytelling, the language and people of Turkey slip beneath their skin. As a publisher of Wild River Books, I'd also like to mention that Anatolian Days Nights is the latest publication of our imprint, which is an outgrowth of the online literary magazine Wild River Review magazine, and you can find that at wildriverreview.com. At Wild River Books, we are especially interested in stories that speak to interconnectedness of all people and societies, what binds us, what breaks us apart, and what forces ultimately elevate us. As Joy and Angie's books show us, carefully nuanced stories can help us relate and connect with seemingly distant headlines in important ways. Over 10 years ago, when Joyce Stocke met Angie Brenner on the Mediterranean coast, they began a friendship that would lead them to the four corners of Turkey, to the headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, to Mount Ararat in ancient Armenia, and to Konya, home to mystic poet Rumi, founder of the whirling Dervish sect. Their research began with one of the world's oldest, excuse me for a moment, lost one page there. I want to move to Çatalhöyük. Their research began in Çatalhöyük. And I want to tell you a little bit about the authors. Joy has been professionally writing and editing fiction, nonfiction, and poetry for more than 20 years. A graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a BS in journalism and a minor in French, Stocke was influenced by journalism professor Wilmot Ragsdale, who taught the legendary class Literary Aspects of Journalism, and who encouraged his students to read poetry because poets care the most about language. Angie began a business career in the mid-70s in California. An avid traveler, she left behind the corporate world, and for 10 years she owned and operated a travel bookstore in Del Mar, California, where she gave numerous lectures on her own travels and that were featured in national press and created a series of author speaking engagements. She is West Coast editor of Wild River Review and on the board of the San Diego Library and active on their Arts and Letters Committee. And before I hand the mic over to Joy and Angie, I'd like to recite one of the Turkish proverbs from her book. A good companion shortens the longest road, which is as true on the poetic path as it is on the travelers. And Joy and Angie offer expert guidance and warm companionship in both for today's journey. Thank you.
As a symbol in many religions since ancient Babylonia, was a most favorite symbol of Jelaluddin Rumi, or Mevlana as he is called in Turkey and Maulana in other parts of the world. According to him, the roof and the doors of the house of love were made entirely of songs and poetry. The lover who can understand the voice of the flute responds to its tune and joins in the sama and flies resplendent around the perpetual light of the divine beloved, like a planet or a star around the sun. Look, this is love. Look, this is love, to fly toward the heavens, to tear 100 veils in every wink, to tear 100 veils at the beginning, to travel in the end without a foot, and to regard this world as something hidden, and not to see with one's own seeing eye. I said, "O heart, may it for you be blessed to enter in the circle of the lover, to look from far beyond the range of eyesight, to wander in the corners of the bosom. O soul, from where has come to you this new breath? O heart, from where has come this heavy throbbing? O bird, Speak now the language of the birds. Without the eyes. Without the eyes, two clouds, the lightning of the heart, the fire of God's threat, how could it be allayed? How could the herbage grow of union sweet to taste? How could the fountains all gush forth with water pure? How would the rosebud tell its secret to the meadow? How would the violet make contacts with the jasmine? How would the praying tree lift its hands in prayer? Say? How would the tree's heads toss free in the air of love? How would the blossoms shake their sleeves in the days of spring to shed their lovely coins about the garden wide? How would the tulip's cheek be red like flames and blood? How would the rose draw out its gold now from its purse? How would the ringdoves call like seekers? Where, oh where? How would the stork repeat his lock, lock from his soul to say, O helper high, thine is the kingdom, thine. How would the dust reveal the secrets of its heart? How would the sky become a garden full of light? You surely have read the translations of Jelaluddin Rumi by Coleman Barks, but these translations are by the Harvard scholar Anna Marie Schimmel, whose books are for sale here. And Barks used Anna Marie as a source for his translations of Rumi. Anna Marie Schimmel was born in Germany in 1922 and died in 2003. A turning point in Schimmel's career occurred when she was appointed professor of history of religion at the University of Ankara in Turkey. And I don't have this age right, but I believe she was still in her 20s. There, she immersed herself in the history and the culture and the mystical tradition of Turkey. At Wild River Review, we are blessed to have Anna Marie Schimmel's niece, Catherine Schimmel-Baki, as the Director of Global Partnerships. Catherine was privileged to spend with Anna Marie's last semester at Harvard, where she spent the semester talking about mysticism in Islam and Sufism. We have a column on our website called The Mystic Pen. You can look at it and you can follow Anna Marie's semester of lectures, which Catherine has transcribed. And I'm going to end with a poem by Anna Marie Schimmel from her book, Nightingales Under the Snow. And it's called Remember. Remember, there were some unicorns in the forest of yore. Playful and white, they walked through the waning moon in the early dawn. Lilies grew out of their steps. But dear, once you smiled at them, and they bowed at your feet, melting like dew. And I cried for envying them.
Angie Brenner on the other half of the Anatolian Days and Nights. And we're going to continue our journey with Rumi and in Anatolian Days and Nights as Joey and I drive across the snowstorm, across the Anatolian steppes in December. And we're on our way to meet our friend Bakir and his friend Mahmoud to go to Konya for the annual Dervish Festival in Konya. And the Dervish Festival only happens once a year in Konya, and it culminates on December 17th when Rumi died. And it's when he became one with the beloved. So that's a very sacred date for Sufis and many people in Turkey. So I'm going to read from our chapter on the Dervish chapter. Listen to the reed, how it tells a tale complaining of separation, saying, ever since I was parted from the reed bed, my lament has caused man and woman to moan. Translation by Anna Marie Schimmel. Bakir paces the doorway of the hotel, his breath creating arabesques of steam in the frigid air. On lampposts, neon signs portraying white-robed dervishes, their hands in mid-twirl, announce the annual festival of the whirling dervishes, celebrating the great mystic and poet Jelaluddin Rumi. "Oh, my friends," he says, "you are here thanks to Allah." He touches his fingertips to his forehead in blessing. Mahmoud opens the car door and we climb in the back seat. We slide in, gripping the headrest. When he swerves into an alley before joining a throng of cars into the parking lot of the Shahir Stadium, the only venue large enough to hold the crowds who come from every province in Turkey. Bundled in heavy coats against the bitter night air, people press through the entrance and swarm the concession stalls, where hawkers sell souvenirs, fake gold pendants, rings, and bracelets representing ecstatic dervishes in tall conical hats, drawings of Mevlana sitting in a meditative repose on a cushion, CDs and books of Rumi. At one table, would-be dervishes try on felt hats and soft black leather boots. Inside the stadium, the well-dressed wives of visiting dignitaries look like rare enchanted birds. Their lustrous, well-groomed manes of hair and colorful suits, while we are bundled, our coats are buttoned to our necks and scarves flattening our hair. We look as if we trudged across the Anatolian plains. Bakir leans toward me. "He's a very famous singer of dervish music," he whispers, loud enough for us to hear, causing the old woman behind us to silence him with a stern click of her tongue. The high-pitched ethereal sound of the ney, a rude flute, moves in waves through the auditorium, enveloping the singer's voice. The ney's plaintive call conjures up the image of a bird calling its mate. "The reed longing for the riverbed," says Rumi, or the voice of the lover seeking God, the beloved. A drum's steady rhythm answers the ney, striking deep and low like a primal heartbeat. Lush chords of a lute meld with the high notes of the three-string Comanche in counterpoint to the drumbeat. The voice of the ney, meant to silence the material world, seeps into our consciousness, undulating through our bodies. Even the fidgety children behind us become still. Like apparitions, the dervishes glide through a purplish light onto the court, behind their teacher, the sheikh, who wears a green robe and turban representing the color of Islam. The dervishes, dressed in black robes meant to symbolize their spiritual tombs, and tall camel hair felt hats representing the eagle's tombstone, prepare to dance. The sheikh stands on a red dyed sheepskin, symbolizing the earth and all living creatures, and waits for the dervishes to remove their robes to reveal pristine white jackets above full white skirts. Music swirls through the arena, the drum beat increases, and as the choir chants softly, one by one, the dervishes close their eyes, tilt their heads toward their left shoulder, and unfold their arms like elegant flower petals. Their right palms reach toward heaven, their left palm toward the ground. In soft leather slippers, they begin a counterclockwise turn, their hearts becoming the center of contemplation and their bodies the connection between God and earth. They are repeating a chant to themselves, whispers Mahmoud. We take from God and give to man, spreading grace to earth. I've spent many years practicing meditation, sitting on cushions in studios and ashrams, breathing my mind to its still point. But I long to join the dervishes, to feel my body turning on its own axis as my mind rests in ecstatic stillness between heaven and earth. Whoo! The choir exhales the breath of God. Whoo! And the dervishes go on turning. The drumbeat draws us into a ritual that unfolds in 3 revolutions around the perimeter of the floor. In the first turning, the dervishes establish a connection with God. In the second, they move deeper into meditation, into their space between heaven and earth. By the third turn, they become planets, part of the universe, and the sheikh becomes the light-giving sun. The drum and ney sing together, and the dervishes' skirts billow like clouds. Eyes closed, the dervishes move as though there are single atoms creating an interlinking field of energy. Not a single unfurled skirt touches another. The beat of the drum increases, the chanting grows faster, but the dancers have retreated into the calm beauty of turning. The sheikh discreetly taps a dervish on the shoulder. The dervish gradually slows his pace and moves to the edge of the court. One by one, the dervishes slow their pace and stop. A final prayer from the Quran ends a collective exaltation. And the breath of God becomes silent. The dervishes pick up their robes, slip them over their shoulders, and follow the sheikh from the arena. Lights go up and no one in the audience moves. The dignitaries rise first, breaking the spell. Cell phones ring, families chatter as they gather their belongings. The grandmother seated behind us has already herded her grandchildren toward the lobby. Beneath the December sky, we untie our scarves and let them fall to our shoulders. Cold air pricks our scalps as we gaze at the stars, feeling as if we, too, have entered the center of the universe. Thank you. Now, Murat is going to talk a little bit about the symbolism of prayer rugs.
Well, thank you, first of all, for coming to Double Knot and for this wonderful event. I've known Joy and Angie for, I guess, just before I opened the store many years ago, and I'm very happy to see that the book is, which I've heard bits and pieces over the years, has become a reality, and hopefully this is a corner of New York that's, that brings you close to Turkey, as close as possible, besides all the wonderful Turkish restaurants that are flourishing around Turkey, around Manhattan now. My own interest in what I do today, which is surrounding myself with all these rugs, actually started many years ago when I was back in Turkey as a student. Interested in literature, history of all the everything that we call Turkey Turkey today, all the elements that make up Turkey, beginning with all the ethnicities and all the various peoples that somehow ended up piled on top of each other in what is today modern Turkey. There are many important works that survive, like Rumi's works, of course, but he probably existed in a society where there were so many more poets and mystics and who have said and sang different things. Unfortunately, probably many of these people did not write down, or some of the things that they have said and sang about have not survived, at least as much as possible. So increasingly I got more interested in rugs because this was another form of expression, and it felt to me at sometimes as I was searching for more earlier works of literature or mysticism or this and that, they were more and more difficult to find, and then there were all these rugs. Certainly you go to a place like Konya, the 13th century mosque there. Was one of the main sources of very early Turkish rugs, layered on top of each other through centuries with donations by people, discovered in the early 20th century and put into museums today. But at every level, from high court art, and when I talk about this, it's not just Turkey, but all of the geography where Turks mingled with a lot of other peoples from pretty much the Balkans to all the way to China, have created at every level, from high court art of Turkey, of Iran, of Mughal India, to the peasants and nomads who created things mostly for for shelter and comfort, especially kilims and things which were primarily sort of for protection, but also beautifully made as works of art or ways of expressing ourselves. A lot of the symbolism, the more you read about these things, you get past the simple explanations that will be given to you if you went to Turkey and happened upon a rug shop, which is not that difficult, whether you want it or not. But there's certainly at every level of society, from really what we would call uneducated young girls who lived in the confines of their tribes and far away from contact with foreigners or strangers, to all the way to court workshops where art was created to be made into rugs, for textiles, for architecture, for all kinds of things. So that is the connection I have with the rugs and the history and literature of Turkey. Am I the last speaker?
Want to talk about the holiday?
Yes.
Yes.
You may have to pronounce it for me, the holiday. Today and tomorrow, I guess.
No, it's Cinco de
Cinco de Mayo. And it's an ancient spring ritual and festival, as Murat mentioned earlier to me, that it's celebrated. It's not an official holiday. It's like it comes from pagan mother goddess roots, and it's based on a mystic, an Islamic mystic, Hiddis, and who was a poor dervish, and he's symbolized by standing on a fish and going through the river of life. So it's a festival where you write down your wishes, because he only once a year does he grant your wish. So this is your opportunity. So we have little slips of paper at the front, and if you want to write down your wish, we're going to gather them and do a found poem using those wishes on Wild River Review. So please leave your email address and we'll put that out. And what they do is they collect the wishes and they put them in their gardens or tie them to trees. And the following day, tomorrow, they will go float down the Delaware River.
Yeah, we're going to take them to the Delaware River, and one by one, we're going to set them out to the Chesapeake Bay. So, what are your wishes?
So we thought this was an opportune time.
And did you want to ask any questions? Because what we do have is fabulous food and wine and stuff from Turks and Frogs, and we have our fabulous musicians who will be playing for us, and they can come. People can come up and ask you questions as well. If
And you can ask us questions now, or we can do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little about the symbolism in some of these rocks?
There's a wide range of things here that I specialize in things that are all of them are old pieces, and none of these, with very few exceptions, like large rugs, which are also antique rugs, but most of the items, especially kilims, were made for household use. So there are the more you read about. I should tell you about another event I had here many years ago. A New Yorker actually, Josephine Powell, who passed away several years ago, after having lived in Turkey for about, I believe, 30 years, and prior to that, she spent about 30 years in Afghanistan. She basically left New York, on an assignment to take pictures, and she never came back. Documenting life in these places. Imagine traveling in Afghanistan in the 60s, and later on in Turkey, she lived in Turkey and really studied nomadic lifestyle. Took a lot of pictures. I have some of her books here. She gave a talk here, and it was a very, very short talk because this is a person who's talked to many women who were actually still the last surviving members of their families who were still weaving. I don't mean weaving commercially, which goes on in many places around the world, but weaving kilims like these out of their tradition. So there are explanations for motifs here and there, and some of these explanations actually are I would say later explanations, sometimes by the weavers to explain, and they certainly do lots of things like protection symbols and things like that. Some of them actually survive. If I can, maybe this is one of the oldest pieces I have in the store, probably an early 19th century kilim from Konya region, actually, in central Turkey. I don't know if you can see it there, but afterwards when you get up, if you look at, there are these S motifs actually done in a brocading technique, those red motifs up there in different colors that are pretty universal, actually. It's not just Konya, it's not just other parts, but you can go to the Afghan weavers, you can go to many tribal groups. This is one of the few things that we can explain. It goes back to a Chinese dragon, actually. There's a famous rug in Berlin that is dated to the 15th century, a Turkish rug, which shows a dragon and phoenix fight in a very sort of like understandable, visible way. Came from an Italian church, acquired 100 plus years ago, and made it to the Berlin Museum, which is it's a Chinese symbol. Turks used to be the neighbors of the Chinese. Actually, one of the reasons why the Great Wall of China was built, to stop the Turks from attacking the Chinese cities. But obviously they coexisted, and many of these ideas, you look at, today Turkey is 99% Muslim, but there are many layers of belief there. But certain common motifs, like this protection idea, the dragon that came from China, that you can see in court carpets in the 15th century, in the 19th century, and everywhere, not just Turkey, but in all of these tribal regions, is a protection symbol. For nomads, the rug is your home. There is no physical home. There's a tent. You pitch your tent, you put the rug down, and that's when you're on the rug. You want that protection. That's why things like like elements of water, rivers running and flowers and things. These are these are motifs that they have. Back in, if I'm not taking too much time, when kilims, these flat weaves, came to a wider attention, thanks to hippies, by the way, in Turkey, and looking for ways to, pay for, whatever they need to pay for, including trips, I guess. They, until they started saying, oh, these are wonderful things. Nobody would buy kilims, nobody would pay attention to kilims. They basically belong to the people who made them, who inherited them, from their families. There's certainly, great graphic qualities, and in a completely different, just to be enjoyed as art without trying to interpret everything. That they're wonderful. But there was a lot of sort of discussion about this, trying to link the motifs in kilims to like earlier beliefs and religions in Turkey, going all the way back to the mother goddess figure which is everywhere. I mean, you know, you go to ancient Greece and Rome, and you know, all these cities, you know, which are much older than any of those civilizations, had these, you know, female deities and things. And there's certainly, you know, I believe in all of that. You know, all of those layers, maybe not as, you know, sort of powerfully or, you know, as much as, you know, some people have claimed, but there's certainly, you know, if for someone to make something like this without any meaning is just hard to imagine. But in many cases, even in, you know, early 20th century, even in the 19th century probably, a lot of these motifs have become just, you know, certain symbols and sometimes decorative elements that they enjoyed making. So there's not an explanation for everything. That doesn't mean that they are not meaningful. I mean, when I personally look at things, you know, these little motifs, these are certainly like, these must be human figures maybe. You go to, you know, clay figures from Çatalhöyük and other Neolithic sites, you know, in Turkey and in the Middle East. There are, you know, clay figures that look like these. Of course, within the restrictions of, you know, it's pretty difficult to make things like that on a kilim, so, you know, much more stylized.
Thank you.
Would you be yes? I'm curious. You said they were the S's for the dragon.
If you come closer, you will see, I can't reach any of them closely because they are further up there.
They look like the E?
Up there, no, just above those E's, they're even smaller.
Oh.
Take a look, and you know, when you come close, you will see them made in a brocade technique. Those S motifs, they're universal in every region. Every tribal group has them, and that's certainly something that weavers will tell you, that it's a protection symbol. They won't tell you that it's a dragon or something. Scholars have made these connections, but they will say that it's a protection.
Thank you.
Oh.
Could you repeat the website where these lectures that were delivered?
Oh, for Honorary Schimmel, it's wildriverreview.com, and the series is called The Mystic Pen. And it's Catherine with a K Schimmel, and it's Honorary's niece.
We'll do one question back here.
Hi. So I knew this lady 10 years ago when she first started talking about this book, and so I'm kind of fascinated to hear you talk about the creative process, because I think people have read about it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. What's out there?
Longer than that, Jade.
Anyway, speak to that.
That's a great question. She asked about the collaborative process of this book. And when you read Anatolian Days and Nights, you'll find out that Angie and I met on a balcony in Turkey. So this book was not an intended book. It came out of our friendship and out of an experience we had in Turkey, and out of our collective love of literature, and also out of people's questions to us, why Turkey? You ask a question like that, and you need to explore that. And I had come out of, you know, I've been traveling to Greece for many, many years, and I saw the connections, the interconnections between cultures and societies, and wanted to go further into Turkey, especially to Çatalhöyük and the various places where you can find the beginnings of religion. And Angie and I hit it off, and she had wanted to write a book, and you know, you think something like this might take a year or two, right? You're going to get started, you're going to take a year or two, and you're going to have this book out there. But it was much more difficult than that, and we have different voices, and in fact the chapter Angie read is in my voice, and you wouldn't know that from how she read it. That was what we had to do. Her chapters that are in her voice, I've edited and gone over them so many times that we no longer are completely separate from one another. I believe more literature is collaboration than many writers admit. I think every writer who's in this room has somebody who's their dedicated reader of their work, who gives them feedback, or any artist in this room. I think it's a complete myth, this idea of the single genius who writes this great thing. So I think collaborations are a great thing if you're interested in it. You do have to check your ego a little bit at the door. And I would like to respond to that.
Yes, in fact, Joy, when we launched the book, she came out to San Diego, where I live, to launch the book. And we did a seminar at the San Diego Writers Inc. workshop seminar on our 4 points of what works for us for collaboration. And that was one of the number one, was to check your ego. And we always kept our eyes on what the goal was for the book. The book didn't, like as Joy mentioned, it didn't start out that way. It started as, wow, Joy, the Dervish Festival is in December. Do you want to go? How many people want to go in the dead of the winter to central Turkey?
Or, Angie, we could go to the headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates River.
So
do you want to go?
So that is how it started. And then we would come home, we would research, and then there would always be one more place we had to see.
Yeah.
And we still feel that way in many.
And I think it speaks to what Murat says about the carpets. As a whole, it's a beautiful design, but each thing has something in it that is something deeper. And I think when great art resonates with us, there's a lot of layers beneath it.
I just want to say also, like the carpets, our travels in Turkey really connected us to our own humanity. We'd come back and we'd find the roots of our civilization, and that spoke to who we are as people. And we found more connectedness between Americans and Turkish people than even Europeans or whatever. We really felt that connection. So it really spoke on a human level first.
One more question.
One more question.
Some music.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you, that having been exposed to these marvels, Sufi and Dervishes and mysticism, how did that change your own perspective from what you were raised as religiously or spiritually?
It's in the book.
It's in the book.
Okay.
Her question is, having been exposed to these marvels, how has it changed our perspective on religion and faith? Do you want to take that first?
Well, let me just say that I do have, Joy and I are both from the Midwest, and it's very sort of puritanical Midwestern roots, and I do have a fundamentalist brother and sister-in-law, and after about, I don't know, 5 or 7 trips, they sent me a Bible. So
and they marked it. You got to see this Bible. They marked passages that will save Angie.
Thank you. I'm needing that for my research. So it does. It's you just have to tread softly with relatives.
It's a good guidebook, the Bible.
It's a
great guidebook.
It's a fabulous guidebook. And that's the thing is a lot of people would say, wow, I didn't realize how religious Angie's getting, because I've studied, like the travels of St. Paul, the home of the Virgin Mary near Ephesus, and so they thought I was really, but it's that finding the threads of where that came from. And you go to a mosque, and then you find underneath that was a church, and underneath that was a cave up with a spring, which was a goddess worship inside. So it just those layers.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We are going to have some special sacred Sufi music before we go in and have our refreshments.
I'll just explain something before we start that might help appreciate what we're about to perform. Ahmet Erdoğanlar is going to perform a piece called Naat, which is a poem by Jelaluddin Rumi, composed in the 16th century by Itri, one of the first classical composers of Turkish music. And it is a very, very important piece, and it's always performed as a prelude to the whirling dervish ceremony. So here you go. And afterwards, we'll be performing a couple of pieces from the repertoire as well.
Ya Hazreti Mevlana Halik-i yektâ-tü bergüzini zülcelali pakü bi hemtatün nazenini Hazreti Hak sadr bedri Nur-i çeşmi enbiya mi çarâ-i-mâ-tü yi Aşkın aldı benden beni, bana seni gerek seni, ben yanarım dünü dünü, bana seni gerek seni. Hannan Allah, mennan Allah, aleyke ya Resulallah, Temiz